this is a great opportunity for me to talk on my experience and to do more with JUC and hopefully get more involved with the task force. I'm born and raised in Colorado, and it's funny because my dad, who's no longer with us, would never believe that I own a landscape company because he couldn't get me to participate in anything regarding the landscape or lawn growing up. So it's kind of funny that I've arrived here. But I got a degree in nursery and landscape management from Colorado State University, and after that moved to California for a couple of years and did some large landscape work there on the commercial sector, and then and I worked through college, and so I did about 10 years working through different parts of the industry, and then, like I said, we've had Diggable Designs for 14. And we moved to the Applewood area in about 2016, and we built a home. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that because today I kind of see it. I'd like to share a little bit of kind of almost a case study with our own kind of journey through creating a low water garden and lawn. And so this really actually, I say that Diggable Designs is my company, so you kind of know I have a background in this that we're putting to work on a daily basis, but I really come here today just as a Lakewood resident and someone, homeowner or someone that's an active gardener, wherever they are, to just share my experience, because it wasn't until I had a home where I could actually go in and start planting these plants and playing with my irrigation controller to understand those effects with how my plants were doing. For years, I was a renter, and we would just install for clients and then walk away, and they'd say, "Oh, how do I take care of it?" And I'd say, "I don't know, good luck," because I haven't had to take care of it yet. So it's been nice to finally be somewhere where I've really watched what I learned in school, what I've learned reading books and going to seminars since then really take place. So today I don't want this to be a sales pitch. In fact, JUC and becoming a member here has actually been really nice because it's kind of an escape from. I can come here and kind of like fill my cup again, and not have to be working. That said, I'm passionate about this, and I've talked to some people in the audience already just about our experiences, and so I don't mind talking about these things. It's fun. I do enjoy it. Certainly, if anyone has a project, they can call our company. But I want this to be a place where I'm just here, learning from all of you and sharing some of my experience. So let's see here. Today, I'm just going to go over a few key elements that I think have really helped make successful low water landscapes for our clients and for myself. And I want to make sure I leave time for questions and comments. I do want to give, I'm going to specifically be talking about gardens in the sense of perennials, trees, shrubs, and then some lawns. I think that's an important thing that's on people's minds with our lawns, and are we good people or are we bad people if we have a lawn? The point is I have some things here that I think can help you lower your water bill, and it's not about what's good or bad, but it's what's best for your garden and how we can keep driving that water bill, but also its water usage. I think we can all agree that water usage is a big problem for our state, and we can all be part of that solution. So I'm happy to comment and answer questions about vegetable gardening from my experience, which is not great. I can grow some zucchini like most people in here. We have grown other things, but I would say that I'm not necessarily an expert on the vegetable side of things, but I'm happy to tell you what we're installing for people, some stuff about soils that we've seen do well with vegetable growing. But really my commentary is going to be a lot about truly the soil that we're planting in and we're growing in and we're actively, so less so about the vegetable gardening, but more so about your landscape. Okay, so let's kick things off, and I'll try to, Martin, you holler at me if I'm getting too long-winded. I'm going to try to keep this thing pretty tight. So as far as key elements for a low-water garden, lots of times we talk about the water and the plants right away, but I think things really start at the soil level, and it's really kind of addressing soil before we address everything else. So it all starts in the soil, and, happy soil is going to produce happy plants. And so we're going to talk about soil, and then as far as plants, really we have to start choosing and selecting the plants that are right for our climate. Being a high desert, we have a lot of clients now that come from out of state, and that's great. I'm happy to have them. Happy to have new neighbors. but I do get asked a lot if we can install, boxwoods all day long and certain types of hydrangeas and dogwood trees and all these things that maybe we're on the East Coast or, or I tell someone, hey, we have to budget enough money for an irrigation system, and everyone's like, what's an irrigation system? Because they just had plentiful rainfall. And so we have to educate our clients really about what does work well here. Of course, from a landscape design perspective, there's the right plant, right place, like not planting the tree too close to the house, but really trying to find things that are using less water, robust root systems, things that can help break up our clay soils, things like that's important. And there's a lot of lawn alternatives. There's some great studies going on, especially in Colorado Springs, that are like lawn conversion, especially native grass lawn conversions are becoming a big thing. I think I'm talking to the right room about this, but aesthetics are probably going to differ between you and maybe your neighbors, or there will be opinions thrown around about if the native lawn looks good, but there's a lot of really good work there. In Colorado, as some of you know, there's things in the newspaper and in different municipalities and cities where they are driving rebate programs, making more rules on the commercial level about getting rid of non-functional turf, which is great. They're not really hammering the residential side, which is good. And I also say I was president of the Landscape Association for the ALCC, Associated Landscape Contractors of Colorado, and so it was great. I got to be in a lot of good meetings about this, and that group and the greenhouse growers and everyone, there's legislation that we lobby for, trying to let the state know that landscaping only uses 3% of the state's water. It's a very low amount. Some people like to blame the golf courses and blame the parks and the people watering their lawns, but in fact, it is quite a small number, but we want to do our part to keep driving that down. So, so when we talk about the plants and the lawns, irrigation, it's just completely vital to establish these things. You can't just plant these low water plants and turn your back and think they're going to do everything on their own, because your job as the person fostering and nurturing their health is about giving them what they need to kind of get that started, because they got to put those roots on, they got to get settled in. So irrigation is essential. There's exceptions where some places for reestablishing open space, there just isn't. Sometimes you can do temporary irrigation, but so in those cases we try to really choose seed mixes that are going to get off the ground running early and that are used to bad soils, used to not having water. But for the most part, when Martin's talking about using plants that we can still have a beautiful garden without using a lot of water, and that's what we're about. When we started our business, people would call and they'd be like, oh, can you just put rock everywhere? And that's not the phone call I want to get. I want to draw everyone outside. We love creating hardscapes and fire pits and walls and water features, but I always tell all of our guys that like to build stuff, I said, that's all great. People are going to enjoy using that, but they want to look at the plants too. So the plants are essential to make that space really what it is. So as you'll see at the end of this, we'll go through a few slides, just how you can still have a super vibrant garden while still using very little water. And still feeding the soil and the pollinators and everything. So we'll get into some of that. And really, again, observation and interaction. Like the point is to get drawn outside, get your hands dirty, and smell those flowers and enjoy your time in the beautiful place that we get to live. So a living soil, as I said, happy soil really makes happy plants. And I didn't know that. I didn't feel like I knew that for the first 10 years of our, not 10, but maybe 8 years of our business. And it took a certain employee who really had more of an ecological mindset, like really opened up my mind to, it was like a sixth sense. It was so cool to understand that this whole other universe is below our feet. And so as a landscaper, well, I'm going to say as a gardener, we have to work sometimes with what we have, and that might be choosing the plants that do better in poor soils, because it can be pretty laborious to totally change your soil profile. But if you have a home that was built anytime, maybe since the 40s, lots of times soil was brought in to backfill your foundation and things like that anyway, so it may not be a native soil. But as you know, we've got problems with bentonite soils, or some areas of the state have very sandy soils. But soils are not always doing us favors when it comes to planting and creating a healthy environment for certain plants. So if you are going for an aesthetic garden, we oftentimes are finding ourselves amending soil and getting organics into the soil, because organics, for instance, if like for my house building project, the city required that we amend our soil at a certain rate. And the reason we needed to do that, because we had disturbed so much soil, we were going to have, potentially erosion problems. We had to do a certain amount of landscaping and coverage, but also they wanted to make sure that the soil we backfilled with and that was on our property was going to retain moisture. So when you have organics in the soil, it's going to hold moisture. It's going to be available to plants. It'll be helping us use less water. And I meant to mention at the beginning of this, some of you might be like, yeah, this is the Green Task Force, man. We've heard all this before. So forgive me if some of you, this is old news. Hopefully this is something that, you've heard some of this and some of this is new. But that's great, getting organics in the soil. I always knew that. What I didn't understand was just how much by what we call inoculating the soil with beneficial bacteria, beneficial fungus, for instance, mycorrhizae. These are things we can really supercharge our soils with to bust up clay, to help plants get in there and extract certain micro and macronutrients out of the soil we have, because they are on the very microscopic scale, breaking down our soil into more usable and helping our plants access it better. So everything from earthworms down to bacteria are using the soil to create better soil profiles and a really rich soil for our plants to grow in. So I'm going to jump over biochar real quick. I'll come back to that. But when we use synthetic fertilizers, again, I don't want to point fingers and demonize people that use, the certain things off the shelf at box stores, let's say to keep their lawns green. I want everyone to know that synthetic fertilizer is a byproduct. Once they've done their job, they've delivered nitrogen, potassium, potash, and I'm missing one. I should know this better, but I don't talk about these three macros enough because there's so many micros to talk about. But the byproduct is salt. And salt in the soil, if you can imagine, is like that basically makes an unlivable experience for plants. And so how those fertilizer programs continue to make you then put that second, third, fourth, fifth application down is because those plants need it, because what they're left with is a salty soil profile. So you have to keep doing that and keep feeding that fertilizer need to make them not take a downturn in their unhappy soil environment. Also, with a salty soil, pretty much everything living in the soil does not want salt either. So if you have a very rich soil because of synthetic fertilizers, you probably have a soil biome. Everything that lives in the soil is probably not as robust. So there are more and more products coming out to help you build a really healthy organic or near organic soil profile that is, once you start creating that ecosystem, then the soil starts to work for you and in balance, and this cycle starts to happen where a lot of positive things are going on, and you really synergize, and there's a great mutual benefit for the plants and the soil. So biochar was one of the, I can't point this at the screen, doesn't like my pointer. Biochar was a very interesting product that we started using 4 or 5 years ago. That is carbon. I have up here, there's a great company called Miramichi, a lot of organic options. They make some soil amendments. This one's called Carbonized PN. It's 50% compost and 50% biochar. So biochar is a little dusty, granular, just pure carbon. And on a microscopic scale, it almost looks like honeycomb. It's very cellular. And so what's great about this is that it's carbon, so it's a very long half-life. With a lot of fertilizers we put in our soils, they break down and they get used very quickly. You have to replenish it. Carbon you can put in and it's going to outlast all of us, that's for sure, based on its half-life. So what's great is on the microscopic level, it's basically a little hotel for all the bacteria and all the little bits and pieces and creatures. And so that's creating housing for all these little residents you want in your soil. So that's fantastic. There's studies going on about carbon sequestration where it actually can draw carbon out of the atmosphere and carbon dioxide and kind of help with that process. But That's a little bit on a bigger scale than I understand or can really get my head around. It's really what I was doing for the soil residents is what's important to me. Also, it's got a massive ability to hold water. So it's about storing water and nutrients. So it's very, carbon and can absorb a lot. So that helps keeps water in the soil and nutrients around. And what's great is the little micro, root hairs, the very fine hairs of roots will grow through those cells and drag that down deeper too. And so you start taking, sometimes your topsoil level might only be 1 inch. It starts pulling a lot of those things down and getting deeper soil profile, and it breaks up soil. And so basically you're creating a much healthier root zone lower, which helps drive roots lower, which roots can access water that's deeper, become more drought and disease resistant if the roots are going deeper. So biochar is an amazing thing that we've been using now for a while. You can buy this stuff on the internet. Honestly, if enough people were interested, I buy this stuff by the pallet, but if JOC has enough requests or whatever, if you can't find some of this stuff on your own, let the task force know, or let me know. And it's something that I love spreading the word on this. I've got no stake in Miramichi. I just can tell you that it's worked wonders for me. So it's really important, I think, to create a habitable space for your plants and everything else that relies on the soil, and everything else we talk about starts here. So choosing your plants wisely. There's a very famous quote I came up with yesterday. If the lack of water doesn't kill them, then the intensity of our sun will. And if that doesn't do it, our dry winters will surely do them in. Every year after planting a new landscape, we go back and do a warranty check. And it's a really frustrating experience because we have so much going against us. We have a gardening department technically, but, for the most part, you turn these things over, and some people have a great green thumb and others don't, but it only takes a dog using your new plant as a bathroom, or our winters are just brutally dry, and can be windy, and it can really just take a lot out of plants. And so, we got to be the best plant stewards we can, but really choosing the right plant initially. Any plant is susceptible to winter kill, but it's just kind of like, even at my own house, I can have 1 year, all these perennials that were just doing great for 2 years can get wiped out because we had that one late frost, or we had that early frost. It's just kind of a brutal environment, Colorado, being the high desert that we are. So it's at the same time, you just gotta roll with it. It's like some things work and some things don't, and that's okay. But give yourself the best chance by choosing good plants. So there are so many good options when it comes to xeric plants. Xeric being low water. And like Martin said, seasonality. Like everyone always wants us to design for seasonality and have something going all the time. There are just so many things that truly do well here. So everyone thinks xeric just means rocks and cactus and yuccas. That's not true, but there's a lot of great yucca on the market, by the way, and cactus, I should say. So the perception has gotten a bad rap, but I think people are becoming more aware of what's there. And then really, like, one of the things I just find that even contractors still need a lot of education on is just how to use better irrigation products, deliver the water in a better way so you can use less of it. When I started, we were like the young landscapers, and coming out of school, and the state was already, so I got out of school in 2001, and that was like where they say our drought kind of officially started, or the most recent one. And, and so there was already water restrictions in place. So for me, all I ever knew was using low water and low flow products. So for us, there was no increased cost of, like, for some people that were in business before that, they're like, oh, now we have to use these heads that have all these special doohickeys in them that are going to cost you more money, end user, or hey, it's how we've always done it. For us, it was like, these are just the products you use. And I hope that when we're all finished, you can come up and look at some of this. So we're talking about lower flow techniques to deliver the water more efficiently to the plants. There's a great resource. I've got a whole page of resources later, and again, whether it's through the recording or you taking a photo of the screen and just using the, I'm sorry, I don't have any QR codes, but to just later reflect or go in and type in some of these, I'll leave the resource link up when I'm finished. Type in some of these websites. But Plant Select, has anyone heard of Plant Select? Great, love seeing some head nods there. So that's a group in Colorado just doing all sorts of trials and tests to find what's what works best in our climate, which it still also makes very unique, interesting plants, interesting colors, interesting textures, and just really pushes the limits on what can be grown here with as little water as possible and do great. So I did put this link here on their website. I didn't notice, but they just have free designs. You know, we were talking, Mary, about there was a water department back in 2004 that for a very limited amount of money would provide you a design. These have like some plant palettes that work together and might work for that corner garden you have and whatnot. So what's great now is there's so many free resources for this, which is awesome. I'm going to talk about lawns. So bluegrass, like, gets a bad rap. I think it can be totally mismanaged, but I personally don't have any problem with bluegrass. As a company, we take it out. A big part of what we do is we do lawn reduction. So it's not like people are asking us to put in acres of bluegrass. That said, we program and establish bluegrass to really maximize its initial potential to later be using less water. So there's just a couple tips. You might see some of these. They put these in the paper sometimes. They're on websites. They're probably coming on flyers from the water department. But, keeping your lawn a little bit longer, that's going to shade your soil, going to not evaporate your water so quickly. You can also keep your lawn clippings down. Let's see here. Also, longer on top is going to translate to longer on bottom. If we have a lawn and we just keep it so short, they don't need a very robust root system to keep that little bit of grass green. So they don't have to really worry about the grass doesn't have to worry about spending their energy growing deep. So if you have it longer, the root, they're trying to stay in balance with each other, the top biomass and the bottom roots. And so even keeping it longer is going to naturally drive the plant. It's going to trigger that response saying, hey, I have to have deeper roots, which is great because you're going to get to deeper water that's down there. Aerating 2 times a year in spring and fall. If you're only going to do it once, I would do it in fall. But that's great because it's really important to have oxygen reach the soil as well. Again, that cycle, we want to water and let that water move down. And as the water moves down, it pulls oxygen in as well. Oxygen is a huge part of what the plant needs to do well. When people overwater, more plants die from drowning in Colorado than they do from not enough water. So that's just, and maybe this group's probably not doing a ton of overwatering, but I think some people don't know how important the oxygen side is too. So when we open up the soil, we let oxygen even get in even more. It also relieves compaction and can help to break up some of your soil for some of that soil biome. Again, going back to the synthetic fertilizers, I would just look to see what other options are out there. I think there's some great ones. Even on the shelves at let's say Home Depot, there's some good stuff there that you can put down that's going to result in less salt. And then the big thing about bluegrass is you got to water more deeply and less frequently. So, ideally you're training your lawn to survive on, let's say, water 3 days a week. When we start water, obviously sod, seed, you water daily, but we really start weaning that off. And if you water deeply, it's going to make and then you cut it off and you don't water for like 2 more days, that's going to make the roots chase the water because the water's still going down. Those roots are going to have to really stretch themselves lower to get to that water. So you train those roots to access the deep water. That's going to build a way more robust lawn. It's going to give you better disease and drought resistance. So there's a big thing that we'll talk about too with irrigation and how to do that and do that well, because we've all seen the water running down the sidewalks when something's watering too long. I'll get to that. So bluegrass, it's really, if you have kids or grandchildren or dogs, like sports, it's the only turf that's going to take the getting beat up like that, honestly. So, it's not going to handle dog urine. We've all dealt with the yellow spots everywhere, depending on the dog you have. But it's one of the toughest turfs out there. And I just say, let's get better irrigation practices before we all just completely say no bluegrass. Okay, it's really about managing the bluegrass. So that's just kind of my note on bluegrass. What's awesome is that there's, in the landscape world, I just went to the Green Industry Conference in February, earlier this month, that I just went to the great speaker from the Springs and from the Colorado Springs Utilities, and there was a panel of different contractors and what they're doing right now for these lawn conversions. And there are just a bunch of different options. Again, this is not going to be the lawn for you if you're going to have 6 kids running around or have 6 dogs, 6 furry kids running around. But if you want a lower water alternative and you want something that looks nice for a good part of the year, it's going to be it doesn't green up. A lot of them don't green up as soon or stay green as late as a bluegrass. And I could talk about fescue and ryegrass and stuff, but really it's like if there's going to be, I think you have bluegrass, which is going to give you a really strong turf, and you're going to have a true alternative. Fescues have their place, but really when if you're converting your lawn, it's not typical right now to say I'm going to convert from bluegrass to fescue. So really we're talking about buffalo grass, which is available as a seed or as plugs. It doesn't really make a good sod. Sod, for those of you I'm sure have had this done in your yard, it's very instantaneous in the sense of like, it wasn't there this morning and all of a sudden I have a lawn. Seed is a very long process. It's difficult because you're competing with weeds. Excuse me. And then plugs are just going to be very small, little tiny pots, and sometimes they're as big as 4-inch, which are more like what I call pots. But plugs are going to be about 1-inch circles or 1-inch squares, and that's part of my case study. I'll show you photos on. Dog tuft grass is kind of an honorable mention here. Not native, but it's a type of Bermuda grass, and it was actually largely developed. It was Kelly Grumman's, and while he was working at the Denver Botanic Gardens. I think I might have the last name wrong for Kelly, but he used to own Timberline Gardens. And just saw this grass growing in cracks of concrete that just wouldn't die. And he's like, oh, what is that grass? And it had a really nice texture. So he started experimenting and just found this like super turf. Excuse me. Again, not a native, but it's very interesting. This is what I have in my house, and we're going to look at I shouldn't call it a case study. I don't have like any metrics to give you. I have some, but it's more like a photo case study. The neat thing about dog tuft is it is resistant to dog urine, so you don't have the yellowing in the spots. It's not an overnight success story in the sense that you show up after work and it's there. It does take an establishment period, but we've been very happy with it. And if you're okay with that, it greens up in June, and in October it starts going back to like that straw color. But I couldn't say enough great things about it. I only mowed my yard 4 times last year. This kind of goes back to the thing I was talking about. My dad couldn't get me to help in the yard. I don't like to mow. Our company doesn't mow. So for me, that was a huge win because it just doesn't get big enough. So here with a dog tuft lawn, it's very fine texture. It can get kind of moundy. This I want to say was the Blue Grandma. So a little longer, very beautiful, great little seed heads. And there's a lot of tours or occasional tours in Colorado Springs. So I have a link for what they're doing down there if anybody's looking for a field trip. I think they open those to the public sometimes, and they take you around to people's yards. You'll be seeing more of that here in town. Tahoma 31 is available to homeowners, I think, through Green Valley Turf. It's another Bermuda grass, but it is a sod variety, so that is going to be more instantaneous. And I think you're looking at least a 30% reduction in water for that type of grass. And then earth turf is one I used in my old house. It's a clover mix, rye, things like that. And then there's a bunch of other clover alternatives. When clients come to us and say, hey, I want to have what about clover lawn? What do you think? And for me, it was tall enough. I had a dog, it's tall enough to kind of hide where he's going to the bathroom, and so I can't clean up after him that well, and that's unpleasant. If you can't do that, clover does attract bees, which is great from a pollinator standpoint. At that time, we had babies crawling around in the grass. Didn't want to have as many bees around, so it wasn't a great fit. So, but again, if you like a little bit more of a natural look, there's clover alternatives out there. All right, I think this is my last slide before we get into the pictures. So again, irrigation. Initially, it's all about training the lawn or your plants to go deep. A lot of these plants that are good for here already are going to go deep, and that's great, again, for accessing deeper water, but breaking up soil profiles that you might need to break. Let's say clay in your garden is just not great, but we have some field surrounding us that's just about 9 inches to 12 inches down, and is about as hard as concrete. I need to accept that that's the soil profile that was there, and we have grass that roots. I think some of this stuff roots like 5 feet deep, and that grass knows how to navigate that soil, so I don't want to try to go and change what was there. We've got a foothills mix, and so sometimes, again, plants are going to like kind of worse off soils, and I don't want to go and have to take care of, you know, the kind of a natural thing going, and that's doing its thing, which is great. So again, we've got a brutal environment here, and it's all about the root development when it comes to the water. That's going to be what anchors the plants into the ground. You know, we do have some wind to deal with sometimes, so getting a really robust root system is important, and so just get that structure and stability. And then access to resources. Again, if that water is not, obviously, once it's down deep enough, it's not soil where we're dealing with evaporation. It's going to stay in the soil longer. So if we can get those roots to get to that water, that means we can water even less frequently. And then soil development, again, that's where you start having the roots growing through the biochar or through breaking up, making more porous root space, meaning that water can move more freely through soil if you have the root kind of breaking up some of those clay layers. And really, that's all just, all of that's going to make a more drought and disease resistant lawn. So if you have a lawn with really short roots, it's not drought tolerant, it's stressed. Basically, some of you might know this, you know, it happens with trees too, maybe that are dealing with an insect issue. They're putting out stress pheromones and are even more susceptible to additional insect or additional diseases. So that's kind of why if we have a less stressed lawn, we're more resistant to disease. So we got to be drought resistant, so we're not under the lawn, and the plants aren't always under stress, because then they're battling everything else on top of that. So we got to keep the plants happy. So again, we need to water less frequently and for longer durations. But with our clay and maybe compaction, depending on how you're using these spaces, you start watering, and I think as soon as the water's saturated, it's saying, hey, no more. I'm sending this water elsewhere, and where elsewhere is with the grade. So if there's any kind of slope, that's when it's running onto your sidewalk and running into the gutter. That's when it's running onto your patio if you have a berm, or maybe creating wet spots and like depressions in your lawn. So we don't want that either. Again, we're just creating stagnant water. That's really adding to compaction of your lawn and garden spaces as well, because the water is just sitting there and bringing smaller particles into those pore spaces, drifting with the water. So we got to break up that water. So what we do when we control our irrigation, sometimes this is automated depending on your irrigation controller, but it's called cycle and soak. That's probably been around long enough that some of you may have heard it and understand it. But if I want to, let's say, water my lawn, now I'm going to be using something that's a low flow nozzle. This is called an MP rotator by Hunter Industries. This uses about 30% of the water. It's very efficient than your typical spray nozzles that have been around forever. It does that in a variety of ways. But if I'm going to run that for 45 minutes to get my necessary amount of water in my lawn, I'm not going to run that for 45 minutes. I'm either going to, most likely, if this is in a pretty flat area, I'm going to run that for 2 run times, about 22. 22, we're only running for 44 minutes total instead of 45. But 2 22-minute cycles. But if I have 4 lawn zones, that first one's going to go for 22 minutes, and then it's going to go over to my second zone, and it's going to be running maybe that side of my yard, and then it's going to move to the backyard for maybe 22 minutes. And so by the time it gets around to zone 1 again in my front yard, it'll have surpassed, 66 more minutes since it stopped watering. And in that 66 minutes, the soil's been saying, hey, I can receive you, water, and I'm going to start moving down. And while I moved down, oxygen came down too, and so everything's open again. And then boom, it's been 66 minutes, time to water me again. That water's low, down deeper in the profile, and now I can take that layer on top. Now I'm full, and now I'm ready for 3 more days of no water. And I'm going to be getting used by the plant, and as I'm getting used to, I'm going to be dropping deeper, bringing in that oxygen. The roots are getting lower, and then everybody's happy. And then that soil's starting to dry out, not too dry, and then we're putting more on top. So cycle and soak. So we got to get that water moving around your yard. And while that's doing it, we're soaking in over here, and a lot of good things are happening during that time. So that takes a little bit of understanding your irrigation controller. Again, more of the smart controllers will say, hey, on your cell phone, do you want to cycle and soak? And you say, great, yes. The smart controllers have their drawbacks, but I've got one up here from Ratio. I think there's a lot of really good things with those, but I want to know that in my establishment period of my lawn and my plants, that I am more in control rather than letting the computer do all the work. So there's a little bit of trial and error, but you can read up a lot on cycle and soak, usually in the irrigation manual or on Denver Water has websites about this. There's a lot of good stuff online if you just were to do a search for cycle and soak. Couple quick nods to the low flow market. There was a law passed, I think, at the beginning of 2023. It may have been 2022, but this is just an irrigation head. But there's a lot of things actually going on inside this head. There's a check valve in the bottom. Some of you might still have systems that after you're done watering, the lowest head in your lawn is just sitting there gurgling and running for a while. That's because it's, all that hydraulic pressure in the lines are pushing enough to lift your little nozzle, and it's just letting that water drain out. Gravity, it's hydraulically pushing that through there. So what they have now is a little check valve. It's a one-way valve. Once the water pressure is no longer great enough, the spring pushes that down and says, no, don't. So your pipes stay full of water. So that's great because you're not losing all that water that was ready to go for the next cycle. And then the other thing they're doing in these is pressure reduction. So a lot of times, like our water pressure coming out of our home is like so high, it makes your water mist. It's just pushing through the little mechanical components in these to where it just pulverizes the droplets and it becomes very light, and wind blows. When on a windy day you just see it and you almost see a rainbow and it's goodbye water and it's going somewhere else. So what's great is there's internal pressure reducers that are going to drop down that pressure so that these low flow nozzles, which I have up here, can do their job effectively. These rely on being bigger drops of water, and so when they're being thrown, they're less susceptible to being blown away. And they're spaced out, but to operate, they have optimal pressure and flow rates to operate at. So these have internal controls. You can't actually buy old models of sprinklers without these items anymore in the state, which is awesome. Vendors that still have some are allowed to use their stock, but they're not allowed to manufacture not allowed to sell to the state of Colorado, at least the old parts. So those are neat. Pressure, you can reduce your whole system with pressure reducers. And then these I've got a smart controller again by Ratio. A lot of weather control, weather sensing, predictive controls on the evapotranspiration happening, so they can adjust how much water you're watering. Again, it can get a little aggressive, and it can maybe cut back a little too much water. And then this is called drip. This is one type of drip irrigation where you take these little buttons that have, this one is a ½ gallon per hour. These black, this is by Rainbird, but so this manufacturer is blue is a ½ gallon an hour, black is 1 gallon an hour, and red is 2 gallons an hour. And so what's great is, smaller plants we can use less water. Trees we can use several of the 2 gallons because if you're watering them all in the same pipe, bigger plants are going to need more water. So we can gauge how much water we're giving them. But so we're in control. We put this pipe down, and then we put in this group, right? Put these in, and this is point source, so we're putting water directly to like the root ball area. Drawback of this is that as your plants grow, you should technically be adding a little bit. You do need to still give them enough water. Again, we're probably establishing most plants 2 to 3 seasons. I would rather have an irrigation system for then if we're ever in a drought and I'm allowed to water a certain amount of time. I do want to give them extra water, but if we're, if we had a year like last year, I didn't turn my sprinklers on until about July 15th. But where am I going? Sorry. I don't want to go and have to keep on moving back like in those first few years because the plants can get very big right out of the gate if you're doing things right. I don't want to have to go that next year and add buds to all my plants. If you have 25 plants or 100 plants, it's a pretty laborious task to move things aside to add more. This is a drip system called inline drip emitters. And so this one I think is every 6 inches. I use these sometimes for vegetable gardens, but every 6 inches, 12 inches, 18 inches, and you lay these out more like a grid to create basically a web of water that is really giving you even coverage. So if you have a dense bed or a vegetable bed, you want to have kind of even coverage, especially if all your plants have a similar water need. You don't want to have like a high water need, low water need, medium water needs. ideally we're all going for low water gardens. You can put something more like this in, and that really encourages your roots to start spreading quickly, which you'll be able to see from this study. Okay, so how am I doing, Martin? Okay, 10 minutes. I'll take questions. Okay, so this is just a resource link that I will put up after the photos, but it's going to provide information. There's the lawn conversion overview I was telling you. Well, actually, no, that top one's really interesting because CSU Extension, if you haven't used it yet, it's a great resource. They have like CSU Extension offices all over the state. There's one here in Jefferson County. And they just have like pretty much every up-to-date plant fact you need on what's going on in the state. But that one specifically talks about lawn conversion ideas, everything from saying, hey, let's reduce this lawn and maybe create a space for a seating area, or a rock garden, or a native turf, or a xeric garden. So that's not going from lawn to lawn. That's really ideas of if you want less lawn and something other than a lawn. Or it's got information on both, really, but very cool link up there. Plant Select, we talked about. It's got great variety of plants. Same thing with High Country Gardens. They're on the western slope. They've got awesome plants. They'll ship them to you, which always makes me a little nervous with shipping plants in the mail, but it works. A lot of good natives coming out of High Country Gardens. If you want pollinator gardens, they've got great information on their website. My big head in the way of any of these photos. Again, I'll bring it back up. Denver Water, which really is kind of the mothership for a lot of smaller water providers, has just an awesome website for water-wise gardening. They're really moving to a term, Coloradoscaping. Again, certain terms, if people latch onto, they can be like a great thing and all of a sudden have like a bad rap. So Coloradoscaping, that part of the website, is just really talking about how do we make a robust Colorado with little water, but still, have a very interesting yard and aesthetics, and so remodel your yard. Again, I'm pretty sure there they have some free landscape plans, a little generic, but they're using like current information. These get Denver Water, Northern Water, all these water departments were at all of the forums and functions with the Landscape Association. Like, they were specifically invited. We as landscapers wanted to help lead the conversation, because if all these municipalities started making all these rules and restrictions, it was going to, as a business owner, you couldn't know all their rules and all their rules, but really it's like trying to have our voice at the table, so bring these people to us and partner with them. So they've been awesome. Really great resource, especially how to set your irrigation timer and whatnot. They also have a Water-Wise Landscape Handbook, which is just a great for DIYers out there too, and just trying to understand your system better and what you can do. All right, I'm going to open up the photos. So my house, and I need to stand by this. This clicker's not working for this. So again, I'm over in the Applewood area. We're off of the old ag ditch is down below in the trees there. We did build the house. We had a lot of restoration to do around the yard. And so in this photo, I'm just using the front berm as an example. So we created a berm for some interest, and we have some drainage going around it. And so the soil there, like I said, was really hard. And so a berm gave us the opportunity to get out of the really hard stuff. So that kind of gave us, generally speaking, in Colorado, a lot of the plant profile is only going to be in the top 12 inches as far as roots, because it's just, again, we don't have enough water to get down too deep. And there's trees that are going to grow a little bit deeper, but even a lot of trees just kind of stay in that, because our oxygen is really kind of staying up higher as well. So it was great to create a berm. That was one little technique we did to make sure we could make a fertile garden. We did some soil amendment. We used a general plant-based, animal-based compost, like manure, can also lead to salts. So we try to go plant-based. But we till that in. In this situation, when you're recreating a space, tilling, you're going to shatter the soil profile, which there's mixed feelings on. Maybe some people in this room know about it. I hope that there's a sustainability group that will talk more about preserving soil profiles, and I'm totally into that. But in this case, we graded all the way around the house, and I had to actually start the process of rebuilding the soil. So to me, tilling to 4 to 6 inches, you need a lot of big equipment to get deeper than that. and to create a rooting-friendly soil was important. So that's what we did here. Then we went through, and my wife Jessica there, she's a landscape designer, knows these plants, and really picked what was going to be good for seasonality, heights, taller things towards the middle in this case because it was going to be viewed from all sides. But choosing really low water plants and we did our best to keep things spaced out enough, right plant, right place, to not overcrowd. But we really found places where even the nursery catalogs, we were like, that plant gets way bigger than that, or this plant seems invasive almost. So we're still learning. So that was the planting day. One thing I would tell you, not everyone, spring's kind of a short window in Colorado before we get really hot. If you are out planting, what I love to do is see that big blue bucket in the background. I got that full of water, and when you take these pots, some small 1 gallon or 5 gallon sizes, besides kind of like massaging, breaking up some root balls, I like to dunk those in the water because they're actually sponge, and it just sucks all that water up. Because if you don't plant that with some water and you plant it dry, the soil, which is dry too, is like, give me that water, and it just robs that plant of anything, of any last bit of moisture it had. So I like to kind of, especially when planting in warmer weather, and knowing too that those first couple of days in transplant shock is a big deal, I like to have those things just soaking wet when I put them in the ground. And ideally, you don't want to be planting in a dust bowl soil, so sometimes you can kind of wet soil the day before. But those first days are really hard on some plants with transplanting. If you could plant a day before it rains, those are some happy plants. All right, so this is this product. This one here is called Netafim, and this is their landscape. Their website's a little intense because they do a lot of like farm water in Africa and whatnot. So there's like international, but on their landscape line, this is called Netafim. Again, it's inline drip system. So I've got water coming out every 12 inches, and they have different flow rates. I think this is 0.4 gallons per hour. And I'm trying to create a relatively even space between what we call laterals. So, and if there's an emitter here and an emitter here, ideally this pipe has an emitter here. So if you imagine when this starts watering and you start getting into growing, the soil is getting wet as it's dripping, that soon it's like a Venn diagram. All that water starts touching each other, and that might seem wasteful to some people because, like, wait a second, like, there's nothing right here. Why would you want to water there? Well, all of these are spreaders. They're ground covers. And so we'll look at some pictures of where they got to. But that plant right there, the blue mist spirea, that plant's going to be 4 feet by 4 feet wide. And that means its roots oftentimes are mirroring that. So I need to draw those roots this direction, this direction. I need to provide water, not just, sometimes if we only put water at the base when they're young, they'll only stay there. They'll only grow that many roots because there's no water out there, So you have to truly establish them, establish them well, draw them out of their comfort zone. So I like Netafim. Some people are like, what happens if I put a shovel in the ground? I want to put something there. As a landscaper, I'm okay knowing that I can just move my mulch, find where that is, and not put a shovel through it. So that was day one. It's still, maybe it's the day after we planted. That's another angle from the street. All right, so it's really important. Here we did wood mulch. This is cedar mulch. It doesn't sometimes seem like the greenest thing. It's shipped in from Canada, so I understand that that's a little shipping involved, and it's a byproduct in this case, the lumber industry. But there's some great recycled mulches in Colorado. Save a Tree, it used to be Mountain High, has amazing. I'm pretty sure they sell retail. Amazing recycled mulches that use natural dyes. So very good for preserving water in the soil, protecting those new little plants. Also, if you can keep direct contact with the soil, and that biome will start breaking down that mulch, feeding the soil. All right, this is 5 weeks after we planted. And this shocked even me as a landscaper. When I was planting, I was putting handful of carbonite in there as well, just so you guys know, backfilling a little bit with some of this. So this has not only a general plant-based compost, we were mixing this into the backfill, and I have a couple flyers, but there's also a QR code for carbonize. But so this does have biochar in it. We do daily watering for the first 2 weeks on our perennial gardens, but then we start cutting it back. So this is 5 weeks in, and I was just shocked by the amount of growth. There it is from the street. So I think this is about July 4th. We planted around June 1st. So lots of times these soil producers, you'll see some of this. There's another really good one, Biosol, Biosol. That's available from several places in town. They just do wonders for the soil, and a lot of them will have things like this, like case studies where they took some before and afters, or just like time lapse type stuff. So I show these pictures to our team too at work to be like, hey guys, this is what the importance of soil prep and getting our irrigation where we want it and using it correctly, because this is what our clients want, right? Like clients, when we show up and the plants are so small, everyone's like, this is all I get for the money. You're like, bear with us, we got to get these things growing. But in my ideal world, everything 5 weeks later is looking like this. Now, it's not exactly fair because I guess we really did baby it pretty good on the planting. But if you take care, I think it really shines through. Here's the back berm. Sorry for the shadows. But again, everything's pretty small when you put it in. It only takes one passing deer to limb one of those off pretty quick. So that's probably at that 5 week mark. You start seeing the ground cover starting to spread. Let's see here. That, I think, is the next season. So there's a saying in landscape and gardening. It says first year sleep, second year creep, third year leap. With the practices I'm talking about, we started seeing, you can see this again, I think is year 2. In the front, to me, it's like leap happened at 5 weeks, but we started seeing as a company, creep kind of left the equation, and we went from, it's like get them through that period where they're overcoming plant shock, and then they can leap that first year if you're giving them the things they need. And again, this is totally, I can't fully say this is organic, but it's just an amazing. It's not synthetic. I can't remember what it is there. I don't know. Maybe someone's out doing. Maybe it's non-organic sea kelp. I can't remember. But there's. It's just we're really feeding the soil again in a positive way, and I just have seen wonders happen because of it. And that's just, I think, last year. Again, it's just like one of these things where Colorado, we don't have to have. It's great if you like a rock garden and cactus. That's awesome, and that's just a different type of look. But people worry like, oh, can I even have color? And it's just like, yeah, you can have totally robust color with very little water. Here's the lawn. So this is the dog tuff. This showed up in boxes with holes in it on my garage. I like rush home from work as this stuff's just like filled with baking in the sun. I don't know how the confidence of these people shipping this stuff via maybe UPS. I can't remember. It made me really nervous. But this is how it looks coming out of those are flats of plugs. So I can't remember if it's 72 plugs or 36 plugs or something per tray, 1-inch plugs. So here we are laying out. We were pretty, neurotic about it. So you don't have to be so, it does look nice when it's done, if it's done in a grid. But what's also nice about a grid is if something else is growing outside of the grid, you're like, oh, you're a weed. I got to get you out of here. So in this process, we do this layout. Some people have seen bull boggers. This is a bull bogger. You don't have to have as robust of a drill, but those are helpful if you want to help. And we have a longer one, so you didn't have to break your back. We did about 1,200 plugs. The orange, I'm sorry, is a paint. That's the marking paint. And that's like when they come and mark your utilities, so that goes away. It's a chalk-based paint. So we use that to help lay out, and then one of us went down with the drill, just zap, zap, zap. Kid-friendly. So this was, 4 or 5, it was 2018 or 19. And so you pop those in, and you plant them, and you try to be gentle with them. And that's how it'll look when you're finished. So again, if something's popping up that's not in that grid, so I need to be, again, it's watered daily, multiple times a day, because it doesn't take long for our sun, this is west facing, to just cook these things. So you're walking around, I got size 16 boots, you don't want to have your footprints everywhere, so you have to be a little careful. But if you do start, you have to, the same thing with seeding, you need to be able to be hawkish about weeds, because if you get weeds getting established and going crazy, it's going to be a battle. So this is where it's like it takes patience, it takes work. As a company, we don't really provide this service right now because we don't have the service to just stay at your house and stay on top of this. So this is more of a DIY game at the moment. There are companies that do this. This is it, maybe last year. I did this after a mow, so you don't really get to see the mounding, tuft look, but it's amazing barefoot. The kids love it, the dog loves it. I was telling someone, my neighbor gives me a hard time because in May, they're like, "Oh, Mike, your lawn's so brown," And I'm like, that's by design. So it greens up at about June 1st. Again, it goes into October. I have a different smart controller called Beehive, and I pulled up. Let me pull this up real quick. What was great is I had the watering history, the year over year, 2023 to 2022. So this all has been in for probably our 6th year. Just last year alone. Now I know we all got the benefit of a very rainy spring, but I didn't turn my irrigation on until about July 15th. I only watered 14 times until the middle of October. So for the lawn, I think that was basically for everything, it was once a week. In the first 2 to 3 years, again, I'm watering most of these things mostly 3 times a week. So we're looking about every 3rd day. So one week it's 3 days, the next week it's 2 days. If you can set up like a cycle like that. But if you like Monday, Wednesday, Friday because you want to mow on Saturday, that's fine too. But what's been great is every year I've been able to shave off like another day or another 2 days. So now I'm watering about every 7 days on this lawn. And so I had let's see here, for days watered, I went from 134 days watered in 2022 to 109. So that was a 19% reduction in water days. And then in 2022, I had a total of 10,000, just over 10,000 minutes of watering time. I wish they would just put this in gallons as well. But in just 1 year, I was able to reduce to 6,255. So that's a 37% reduction. And again, this picture and this picture here are from this last summer. So we got the roots down deep. We got them healthy. We've got a great thriving soil, and things are happy and doing well. And everything just keeps driving the water usage down. Again, the water bill going down is a great benefit, but knowing that we're using less water has been awesome, and we're just getting to enjoy a beautiful landscape. And I hope that I diminished my involvement in my company and hope I didn't overly blow up my head about my landscape, but it's all I could do to show. It's what I have pictures of like the process and the results. And so that's why I show it to you. It's just to show you that I do believe in it and I think it works. And so, and that was great to pull that up and know that we are using less water. So I'm gonna put this back up and just go to some questions more.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, John.
I just moved into an HOA last summer, and I want to get rid of the front lawn landscape. I understand that the law was passed that said HOAs can't prevent that, even though my HOA still wants it.
Right.
Wants to look at the plan. And I guess what would be the process to engage or to make that happen?
That's a great question. I won't be able to answer it probably to perfection, just because I don't have all of the answers. Especially, we work so much on that's a residential situation, but in some ways it's a commercial in the sense of property management. I don't have as much experience in the HOA realm. I can tell you that everyone across the street from me is part of an HOA, and they complain that they won't ever let them do these things. They want to push back because of the legality of it. I would say that trying to find other models of what's working. I would, if they want to look at the plan, I would work with a professional landscape designer, or do your homework on some of these sites and try to do a presentation of your own. But there are landscape designers out there that I think there's a lot of 3D renderings going on. I think a lot of the people are worried about creating an uproar within the HOA. But if you're able to show even a 3D rendering of what your yard would look like, and the software now for landscape designers, it's just a click of a button and they can just kind of take it from a street view. Like I would say, if you're going to have a landscape design done, ask your designer about 3D renderings. Our company, some of our designers use them. We're still trying to figure that out. But I would say that as much as you can do to put yourself in the best light is great. And I would also just lean into the laws as well, right? There's some stuff about solar and restrictions on your on your house. It's like they can't stop you from doing solar either. So, to my understanding, so I would start there, and then also a lot of landscapers now. I don't know if you guys have a landscape manager of your HOA, but there's something called SLM Colorado. That's Sustainable Landscape Management Colorado. A lot of landscapers that are like ALCC members are trying to educate the people at the property management level and at the HOA level about some of these practices. So like as an industry, we're trying to reach across the table to these folks to kind of help all of you in that sense. But as of right now, if they just want to see the plan, I would work on trying to get a rendering.
You mentioned these associations of landscapers. Are they also working with the real estate sector? Because let's face it, every time a house gets sold, the realtor typically steps in and says, well, you can't sell this house with this lawn. And they put in some turf.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the first thing they want is that street, front yard appeal of the green grass. It's tough. I think there's certain companies who are trying to just, as far as a marketing plan, maybe trying to get into the hot real estate market to try to get in there. From an association level, I don't know if there's a direct connection right now to like a real estate association about it. There's a big outreach right now for SLM Colorado especially. But what they try to do, I think, is commercially and in the HOA realm, they try to approach those because it's kind of like a bigger dissemination of information first than necessarily on the individual retail residential real estate market. But that's a great thing that would help a lot of us, both contractors and homeowners.
I mean, there might be some interaction already because there are so-called green realtors. This landscaping aspect is certainly one that they cannot ignore.
And the builders as well, Martin. There's some communities that are talking about, we have like these water-wise landscapes.
I want to ask if there's a science to rock placement, and I have rocks and I want to get rid of them.
There you go. Nice.
Any ideas on what I could do with them?
Well, to actually use them yourself, or good ways to market getting rid of them. So I can talk about both. So for yourself, if you were to do a little looking around online and find a look that you like, rock gardens, alpine gardens, like recreation. So creating layers, and there's a lot of great plants like ground covers that will kind of have a spillover effect. And so you get this awesome interaction between rock and plants. By themselves, you can be like, oh, it's so boring, but to try to integrate plants with them makes, or doing one larger boulder, a medium, and a small, trying to create some flow. And we always bury our boulders and larger rocks about 1/3 of the way. It makes it look more natural. So I can't stand going to a landscape and someone just had a big rock just dropped and it looks like it fell out of the sky. So trying to make it look natural, integrating some plants is nice, and you can use them to kind of retain some soil, maybe build up some soil behind it, and then put a nice plant on top of that, and then use the cascade effect of other small plants in front of it if you want to use it. Create them as a retaining wall is great if you got any slope to your yard. And then when we go in and do demo on someone's landscape, we try to Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace the good landscape materials. My wife doesn't love the boneyard of landscape materials I brought back to my house, but I can't seem to throw some of these things away. But there's a lot of people that would love some. It depends how big they are for transport, but we always put out there to market free, and people will take the craziest things that are free. But some people are really on the market for rocks. If you want to get rid of them, put it out there, and some people will buy them. But when we do demo, we try to salvage that stuff because there's someone else that wants it. But I would look into trying to use it, make it look natural, use the plants and the hardscape together.
There's even a better method. Rather than putting up a sign free, put a sign up $20 and somebody will steal it. Do we have another question? Yeah, Tom.
Hi. We have a house that was built in the 60s. It used to start off with a big standard suburban lawn. Over the years, new features have been put in, like different patios, porches, driveways. So now we have a situation where we have a an irrigation system that still works, and a plant areas that are divided up into really small pieces, most of which are kind of odd shaped. Like we have a health space that we have, rock garden. What we've been trying to use are those like drip lines or weeper lines that are made out of recycled tires that come from a manifold that you can just replace an old-fashioned sprinkler with.
Yeah.
What's your experience with those? Because we just don't have enough spaces to run that weeper line you have. It's just too stiff to turn around once in the areas we're trying to irrigate.
Yeah, great question. Like, yep, this one here, Tom, is 3/4 inch, and this is the only one I had in my yard because it's off season. But typically we have 1/2 inch because it's a little bit more flexible. And this one here is even 12 millimeter, which is a little bit less. So the products are getting better for that, so you can go and make turns. But I understand it may not be practical in your situation still. When it comes to the soaker hoses, it's fine to use them. I'll just be ready to potentially be replacing them every once in a while. But I definitely believe in this being the way to drip or soaker hoses. We kind of use some of them interchangeably as the way to irrigate those areas. And lots of times, if we have an old system, I have to warranty it for a while. So if I know it's time for someone to replace the irrigation, I just tell them, hey, we got to replace this. And we really talk about the investment of the infrastructure up front. But if someone has, let's say, an old pipe that goes underneath the sidewalk or under your driveway over here, I will find it on that end and find it on this end and still use the part underneath there just to use what I can to not have to, recreate the wheel necessarily. So using some of that stuff to get water far enough over here so I can dig down, put what's called a coupler in there, and take it from there, I would do it. But some of this stuff is thin-walled enough that it turns better. Or you can even put elbows on it and kind of make a couple grids. So I would suggest you keep working with drip lines, but try to look into some tubing that's specifically drip tubing if you don't want to use the rubber soaker hoses anymore. But they're getting better. What's that? Oh, they seem to be okay. Good. Yeah, that's really good for flow. Yeah, no, that's great. And keeping a little bit of mulch on top of them, just so good. You're just sitting in the water and you're keeping that UV off of them too. They're going to last longer. But that you're using the right solution. And just so you know that the products are getting better and more flexible.
Do you have anything to say or advise on fire-wise gardening and landscaping? Because obviously that has been a concern.
Yeah. I don't have a ton of information on that. I will say that when I was looking into people say, oh, well, you saw my grass there in the background 3 feet tall. And during the fire up in Marshall Fire, that was a big concern for all of our neighbors, right? So I'm keeping that further away from my house. You can cut things back when they get more dry, but I do know that the work Colorado Springs is doing with the native grass conversion, someone's like, oh, how does that play into Firewise? And so they have a whole article right now about that, for instance. So the best practice that I know of right now is, yes, not planting too close to your house. I'm not going so far to say, hey, you need a 10-foot rock border around there. But I do think, on online right now is probably the best place to get true resources on that. I don't have a lot of experience even though now we know that, a catastrophic fire can happen in the urban setting, but it's not something right now that we're working with that I have a lot of information on.
Yeah, there's a question here.
Do you use or recommend garden in a box?
Yeah, so we have a client they have a property where they wanted some of their own space to do some things, and they've been using garden in a box and having great results. And they've been, so I'm pretty sure garden in a box, if I'm thinking of the right group doing this.
That's EcoCycle out of.
Yeah, okay, so they'll send you, if you want a pollinator garden, right? They can send you, and I mean, all of a sudden this guy's plants were outpacing our plants, it seems like. So the products he's been super happy. And if you can say, I've got more shade or I've got more sun, if you can kind of dial in your situation best so they can kind of get you set up for success. I know so we haven't been using it, but my client that we've been working for several years is, and I've seen his pollinator garden do quite well.
Yeah, we used a few to fill in, and the gentleman in the back asked about the HOA and pick a big one with, 27 plants that covers, give you square footage, and it tells you exactly what it covers. And then you have those plants, and it gives you heights. It tells you where to put it, and that would be pretty good for a small part. Yeah, because you don't have to necessarily tear out all the grass, but if you wanted to carve out something, again, some of those websites and probably garden in a box,
have some of these combinations that work well together, and you don't have to necessarily say all or nothing with the HOA. And I will say that I think when I was reading and pulling some of these up, I think it said garden in a box. Some of these cities, I can't remember if it was Denver or Aurora, they've partnered with, I thought it said garden in a box, to come have affordable like lawn removal and have rebate programs. And I want to say garden in a box is partnering with them to where they'll have like, maybe it's a rebate part of the removal of your grass. And so there's stuff out there right now for trying to help you get rid of the lawn. Good.
In this discussion, I just remembered an organization a friend of mine with 350 Colorado co-founded up in Boulder. It's called Fruit Rescue.
Oh yeah, great.
And it's an organization with a great concept. They have a bunch of volunteers who connect with homeowners who have fruit trees on their property and are usually not able to eat all the fruit or even harvest it.
Yeah.
So they send the volunteers there, they collect the fruit, and the homeowner gets 1/3. Another third goes into food banks, and less usable fruit goes to the wildlife refuge where lots of animals in zoos or similar institutions can still eat it.
Love it. Yeah.
So fruitrescue.org.
Yeah, I think I've heard of that as well. And I think that's an awesome service.
Thank you again.
And I will stick around for 5 or so minutes up here, or I'll leave the stuff up if you want to come look at it, but I'll stick up here specifically for questions, and then I'll head in there and socialize.
Very well. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you.